All right, everybody, welcome back to Brew Talks Fort Collins. We are going to talk about a subject now that I care quite a bit about. I know a lot of people in the audience care about, and that is sustainable brewing practices in the beer industry. But before we get into the discussion we have with our panelists here, we've got Katie Wallace from New Belgium. She's the Assistant Director of Sustainability here at New Belgium, and she's also the co-chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee for the Brewers Association. She's going to talk a little bit about their benchmarking program. Katie?
Thanks, Jane. Hello there. So on the Brewers Association Sustainability Subcommittee, we've been around for a couple of years, and it's a group of really passionate and hardworking brewers who want to help the rest of our industry have the tools at hand to reduce their own resources and improve sustainability among craft brewers. So we've done some cool work. We have a set of manuals on the website. So if you go to the Brewers Association Sustainability page, you'll see those. And I'm really excited to announce a project that we've been working hard on, which is a sustainability dashboard. So you'll see these handouts at your chairs, and it has a little bit of information on there. But it is, we've worked with a consultant, and it is a free resource available to all BA members. So you can track your utility usage, your water, your energy, and your waste, CO2, and set goals to reduce them. And then you can also use this to check out your usage among other craft brewers from the benchmarking study as well. So the more people that use it, the better the data is, and hopefully it's a valuable resource for you guys to track utilities, make it a little bit easier, and create some reductions overall. So with that, I'll leave it to the panel. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, Katie. All right, so getting into this, sustainable brewing practices is obviously something that brewery business owners are caring more and more about. As manufacturers of consumer product goods, we generate a lot of waste. Wanting to reduce some of that waste, not only to improve our impact on the environment, but also cut back on some of the costs and losses that we get. Sustainable brewing is something that we are prioritizing more and more in our industry. With that, we've got 3 brewery representatives here from local breweries here in Colorado who have taken on sustainability as an important priority in their own businesses. We've got Jenn Vervier from New Belgium. She's the Director of Sustainability here. We've got Dany Pages. He's the Director of Brewing Operations at Upslope. And we've got Taylor Krantz, who is a brewer and kind of resident sustainability expert at Fort Collins Brewery. So with that, before we kind of get into a whole lot of stuff, the first thing I wanted to ask you guys about is just why is sustainability so important to your specific businesses? Jen, you want to kick it off?
Sure, and I feel like I've told this story many times, but it makes it no less true. When our founders started New Belgium in 1991, before they ever sold any beer, they set out to be really clear about what kind of company they wanted to run, and they created 4 core values and beliefs. The first of which was to create world-class beers, the second of which was to be environmental stewards. And then the others were to promote beer culture and to have fun. And so for us, it's been part of our DNA from the very beginning.
Sure. Dany?
When we start Upslope Brewing Company, we, from the beginning, we decided that we were going to be an outdoor brewing company. So that is, and put great beers and to these people who is more focused on outdoors. So we choose cans for that, and then we decided they're going to put the best beers possible from craft beer in cans for all these people outdoors, because we like Colorado and the environment where we live. We want to protect it, so that was kind of our focus from the beginning as well.
Live it and put it in your brand, right?
Correct.
Sure. Taylor, how about you guys?
Over at FCB, it's definitely something that's been incorporated from the get-go from everybody that's been there. It's definitely something that, looking at efficiencies, it's something that's important. It's somewhere where you can make more out of the same, or more out of the same amount of material, or the same out of less material. But for me, it's definitely looking at the longer term of your business, and then also taking it a lot farther than that. It's also looking at the long term of your product. What's the full life cycle of that? Where's it going? Where's it ending up? And then the waste that you're producing. Everything that you're doing, you have an impact. And so looking at the long term of your business and the long term of everything you're doing, I think it's very important to look at.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as much as we all care about this issue, for sure, it's there is a pragmatic side to it that can kind of hold some people back. A lot of the breweries in the audience are just starting out. A lot of them are pretty new, or they're undertaking new endeavors. You guys are all at different stages of your growth personally. But one of the things that I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are curious about is, when you're starting off as a new business, your main priority has to be about just, turning a profit and getting your business off the ground. So how do you justify taking something like environmental sustainability that can be, really costly in terms of your initiatives and the equipment that you install? How do you take something like that and justify it to investors or employees or yourselves as business owners?
Sure. Jane, you have so many questions there. But I think, we talked about this earlier. I mean, sustainability just is enlightened self-interest. It should not be an added cost on top. And when you're starting out your company, brewers are tinkerers, in my experience. They're about great design, and great design is efficient design, and efficient design uses less to make more, as Taylor was saying. So, and then with every person that you hire in your company, whether they're in sales and they're driving around, or they're in marketing and they're producing POS, or they're in the office, like, sustainability should be part of their jobs. You don't need a sustainability team, even though it's awesome to have one. If it's just about having passionate coworkers who want to do the very best for their company, then I think sustainability is built into that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something that can generate some cost for your business starting off, and not everybody starts off with like a big pile of money to start their business with. You got to go to a bank and tell these people, this is what I'm going to do with my brewery, and this is how I want to approach it. And someone might look at some more expensive equipment that you're trying to install and say, well, what's this all about? You got to keep your costs down. Danny, this is something that I know that you guys have kind of faced. How did you guys approach that early on?
Well, from the beginning, we justified to be forest sustainable source. The cardboard, all our packaging is forestry sustainable source, and that was more expensive. Also, it's 100% recyclable. The cardboard, or supplier take the cardboard, and that obviously make it much more expensive. But again, if we say, okay, we have this background of, we like the outdoors, we like Colorado, well, we're gonna justify that, saying like, that's what we are. That's what we want to protect the environment how much we can. They know that the trees are being cut are coming from a place where we know where the source to create that cardboard is coming from.
So, I mean, one thing that you're kind of touching on that you guys that you've spoken about so far is this sort of concept of different packaging and wanting to make that an important thing. There's a myriad of different, initiatives that a brewery can take when they decide to become sustainable, from going to 100% wind power or installing solar panels to taking on more environmentally conscientious types of packaging, right? But I mean, you can't do everything. So how do you weigh those decisions? How do you determine what makes the most sense to tackle early on and what you should take care of later?
That's actually a great question, because like you said, there's so many different options that you can do. And like you said, it can be very expensive depending on what you are wanting to try to do. And I think it's one thing, it's very situational. You have to look at your business and where you're at, and what makes sense as far as, does it make sense for your business? Is it something that you're going to be using constantly, and are you going to invest in it and get a better return on investment than you would if you invest in something that you don't use as often? So what's kind of the return on that? But yeah, there's all sorts of, you go around to all different breweries, there's all sorts of brewing engineers, and in the sense of that they make it work. And so I remember seeing pictures from New Belgium where it's, they had all sorts of little, I believe it was a heat capturing device, just in a tiny little place that they're at. And it's astounding what brewers can do if they really set their minds to it, and other people, other business owners. But in some instances, it does make sense to invest in something else. It's for us at Fort Collins Brewery, we did move into a new facility not too long ago, and so there was a lot of hard questions to ask ourselves, and which ones made sense based on the building, or is there other support for you?
Well, what's like one of the first, kinds of initiatives that you guys, took on at Fort Collins? I mean, what's one of the first things that you guys really took on as an important priority?
As an important priority as far as sustainability, one of them is definitely what a lot of brewers do is, trying to minimize how much water, chemical, energy you're using. And it can be very different based on the facility you're in. I'd say that's definitely one of the starting points that we had.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what about you guys, Jen, here at New Belgium?
Well, just going back to what you said before, I mean, it's kind of an opportunity depending, like Taylor said, where you are in your life cycle. Is this the year you have the opportunity to work on your landscaping, or it's the year that you're going to work on your CIPs, or it's the year, that you're going to cross the threshold and start hard piping
Choose
your
your
operations. So what we often recommend to people who are just getting started is figure out what your usage is now, because that doesn't actually cost any money. So look at your utility bills, get them into a spreadsheet, figure out what your baseline is, and then start setting some goals. So that I think there are a lot of things you can do without spending money.
Yeah, but are there specific initiatives too, though, that you kind of prioritize over others? Are there things that you've said, well, we definitely want to take care of this first. This is something, based on our usage and here at New Belgium, or your usage at Upslope. These are things that we're noticing we're losing a lot of money on, or we're generating a lot of waste with, and we want to take care of this first.
I would say the biggest bang for your buck is beer loss, right? Extract efficiency.
For sure. So how do you tackle that? Dany, for instance, you as a brewery operations, manager.
Yeah, definitely. I'm agree with Jane. The first thing you need to know before I attack it is where are your resources coming from? What are your usage? What are you spending the most? And try to attack that deal. For example, we identify in Upslope that after every filtration, we have a huge loss on the yield. So we would love to have a centrifuge or a better filter in order to attack that thing, and we couldn't afford that at that time until I could justify, like, hey guys, if we can buy a centrifuge, I can save 3 barrels per filtration. We can pay for that centrifuge in 2 years, and that's the way you can attack those kind of items. Like, first identify what your usage are, and the waste and the yields and that kind of stuff. And
So, but as a growing brewery, though, all 3 of your breweries, although they're at different sizes, definitely, they're all growing. But as a growing brewery, no matter at what stage you're at, you're going to hit a wall eventually where you simply can't afford to do something, right? I think everybody here can say that, regardless of sustainability, that they've hit a wall where there's something that they really wanted to do, or they really wanted to buy, or they really wanted to undertake, but they simply couldn't afford to buy it. So one of the things that brewers are pretty good about is finding creative ways to solve problems. And I'm curious if you guys have ever had an instance in which there was something you really wanted to take on, or your brewery really wanted to do, but couldn't necessarily, invest in that specific initiative or invest in that specific solution, so you got a little creative.
I guess I can speak to that a little bit. One of the things that was happening at the Funkworks facility when FCB was in there was they were doing water treatment, kind of neutralizing it, starting that process before sending it to the city. So it was something that was important to them, but moving into the new facility, it was something that, looking at that kind of system, was very cost prohibitive. And so to help mitigate that, they did develop kind of the different chemical pit system, which was, one of them was chemical pit, one of them was an organic drain. So initially separating those out, the organic going to farms and whatnot, and then the other one was based on our chemicals. They would start to neutralize a little bit, but it wasn't quite, the same process. So I'd say that's one way. It's not the full system, but
Sure.
It's something that we wanted to try and do, at least to mitigate it.
What about at New Belgium when you guys were early on, growing your, obviously you guys wanted to, as a core value, make this a priority in all your moves, but again, you can't necessarily afford to do everything.
Yeah, absolutely. You prioritize things, and like Dany said, knock them off when you get to a certain size when there's an ROI there. I think looking back, one of the things that I'm most proud of that was a creative solution is that we used evaporative cooling on our packaging hall. So, you have 50, 60,000 square foot building, and it's just a large swamp cooler. So there are no compressors used to cool that building, and which is great. You can do it in Colorado, so you should,
Yeah, for sure. Dany, what about you guys?
Well, when we were really small 8 years ago, we believed that the cans were better packaging than bottles, more sustainable. But we couldn't afford to buy a new canning line. So how we keep growing without trying to go in bottle side. And I talked with the engineers next door, and I helped them to develop a canning line. And we're like 7-8 months of trial, dumping beer on the drain, and helping to develop this prototype. And now that canning line company is really popular. Is maybe 80% of the craft brewers that are canning beers and cans are using this company, and they're producing 7 canning lines a month or something.
So I mean,
like
that's an interesting point that you make, though. I mean, there are times where as sustainability becomes sort of an evolving issue in the industry as the industry itself grows, where you can't necessarily do something that you want because the technology that you need is just not necessarily available to you, or if it is, you can't necessarily afford it. So
Yeah.
you can work with these partner businesses or other businesses that you have at your disposal to develop something new, whether it's...
Well, wasn't, in this case, it wasn't something new, but it was an opportunity. Then I talked to them and say, look, guys, craft beer is going up, and if you help me to develop this machine and help us to create the machine for us, we have this money that we can invest, worth no much, or maybe $22,000, and not $80,000. That was the price of a canning line at that time. You could be the first canning line company in the country for craft beer industry, small canning lines, in United States, and you can do your business later. And I knew we were going to be ahead of the game at that point. I hoped that would be the case. So we get creative in that area, and that's kind of cool because we see. I think we help a lot to the revolution of canning and craft beer. We were one of the first breweries putting IPA in cans and Belgium pils in cans, and that's kind of cool that I'm seeing now really cool beers when before were kind of sacrilegious, sacrilegious to put a beer in an IPA in a can, like, are you crazy, and now you can see that we help that, and also for the environment. Again, we believe that cans are better than bottles. So.
Well, I mean, but what are some ways, though, that you've worked with other, partners, that you've partnered with people outside of your brewery, maybe outside of your immediate comfort zone? I mean, I know, Jen, you guys have teamed up with University of Colorado a few times. You guys have teamed up with other businesses. What are some ways that New Belgium has sort of tapped into other individuals who are exploring sustainability?
I think one of our best partnerships was with the city of Fort Collins, actually. So with our local municipality, who had a goal to reduce peak load on the feeder that we're connected to. So that was one of their projects. And so we partnered with them to get a Department of Energy grant to add more renewable on-site generation, to do peak load reduction through creating, cooling at night, both for HVAC as well as for work cooling. So by way of saying, I think the opportunity is with your utility in a lot of places, and we've already started talking to the utility in Asheville about what their goals are around reducing peak loads and how we can participate in that project.
So, I mean, and that kind of leads into my next question for you as well. As you, as a brewery, grow, and I think a lot of other breweries here are going through similar times of expansion, maybe not as large as New Belgium, maybe they're not all opening, breweries in Asheville, but everybody here on this stage anyway has undergone a recent expansion, or they're undergoing expansion right now. I think a lot of breweries, are kind of undergoing expansions or thinking about expanding. How do you take a core value like that and incorporate it into such a costly project like Asheville? I mean, it's a huge project that you guys are undertaking. How do you incorporate that when you're, so strapped down with the need to get it online as fast as possible and to keep your costs down?
You take 20 years of experience and you design it in, right? I mean, so
Become an expert.
it's a great opportunity. Yeah. I mean that honestly. Like we would have a blank slate there, and we knew exactly what we were hoping to achieve. And because we master planned it, so we're saying that site's going to be 500,000 barrels. We know exactly how big the brew house is going to be. We know what the pipe runs are going to be. We know what the utility loads are going to be. So we could optimize everything. Here in Fort Collins, we opened up that tasting room with our first brew house in 1995, and we did our last expansion here in 2013. So you don't get to design things as best as you might want in that situation. And there are so many things in Asheville that we've done that we're really proud of. Like we are really close to getting LEED Silver on the brewery, and should hopefully get on the distribution center, and should hopefully get higher on that for the tasting room and the brewery. But there are also things that we couldn't afford right now as we're opening, and that they're on our project list to do in subsequent years. And I think that's just always the case.
Well, I mean, like what? Like, how do you decide what goes in first? How do you decide what gets taken care of first and what needs to kind of be put up on the shelf and revisited at a later time?
I think you look at first cost versus overall project cost, and those things that are most effective to put in as your whole construction team is mobilized and you've dug up the ground and you're installing your utilities. Obviously, those come first. But something like, you maybe buttress the structure of your roof to put on solar PV because you're building the building, but you don't put on the panels themselves until a couple years later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. For you guys, I mean, I know your expansions have been a little bit smaller in scale, but they're still pretty significant. One of the things I'm curious about is, I mean, how do you guys take equipment that you've put in place or programs that you've built into your brewery already, and then translate that or incorporate that into a new facility?
I would like to do a quotation mark before I answer that. First, I feel like kind of awkward sitting here talking about sustainable things. It's like a street performer at being invited to talk about acting next to Brad Pitt here. So. Also, I'm not drunk. My accent is from Argentina.
You can't have 20 years of experience, right?
But there's a lot of ways to approach how you can build more sustainable. If you are aware, if you're, every time you purchase an equipment and something, obviously always the cost is a huge deal when you're a business and you need to be profitable. But the way we approach stuff in Upslope, it was kind of, okay, this equipment costs this thing, this number. This other equipment is much more efficient and costs this much, maybe $15,000 more. And it's a better equipment, more sustainable, more green environmentally. And you do the math and you say, okay, if going in this direction with the green equipment, you do the math and you say you're going to pay in this amount of years, and then you at that point you had to do that push. Maybe it's $50,000 more, but eventually you're going to pay for it. Like in general, the sustainable stuff goes hand to hand on the efficiency and the profit as well. If you see now, like Walmart is doing a lot of really green, sustainable things, and it's not because they are really green people, it's because they are thinking in profit, and in that hand, I feel like if you're aware, you will take the right decisions going always on the sustainable side, because you're gonna pay for that equipment earlier. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. You can get the money and it's fine. But if you are taking care of the environment and you're aware about your place you live, in general, you're going to find out that going in the sustainable ways is better for the environment, for you, and also for your business as well, and the profit side.
Well, and then kind of, on the other side of that is the fact that there's more to beer companies than just the brewery, right? I mean, there's events, there's offices, there's, if you have, internal delivery systems yourself, you've got any number of things that you're generating waste with that have nothing to do with production at all. And just because you can't necessarily do something or it might not be initially cost effective to do something at the brewery level, it doesn't mean you can't incorporate something into your company. You can't counteract waste with your company. I know Fort Collins Brewery, all of you guys do a lot of different things. Fort Collins Brewery does some pretty interesting stuff. How do you guys kind of approach reducing waste outside of the brewery?
Outside the brewery, aside from the brewing process and normal waste and whatnot, one of the ways we do is all our salespeople, we definitely incorporate fuel-efficient cars. So we have a little fleet of smart cars. You've probably seen them driving around town with the label on them. But so that's one way. And the other way is we also have the restaurant, which we try to translate all of this into. And so the restaurant, a lot of people come in, it's kind of the face as well. They're right there with us. And so making sure that they're right on board with us. So I think it really translates.
Sure. Dany, what about you guys?
I think there are a lot of small things that you can do, like being in a small brewery. Like sometimes just be aware. If you really care, you just need to be aware. But like motion sensors are $25. LED lights are not really expensive and save a ton of energy. And there are so many things you can do. Put your yeast out of your drain. It's gonna help the city a lot. Even if whatever you send to the drain is going to be treated for the water treatment on the city, you can help then taking your yeast out of your drain, and the farmers take it. There are so many small things that you can do being in a small brewery. Put in curtains and walk-in coolers, open doors. Maybe those are more expensive stuff, but there are so many cheap stuff that you can do being in a small brewery if you just are aware about that kind of stuff.
Oh no, I was saying, what about New Belgium? This is my first time walking around here today, and I was actually just commenting on Jen on how sustainable the ladies' room is. It's pretty great in there. But what are some of the things that you guys do in New Belgium too?
Well, I think, motion sensors is a great one that pays for itself really quickly. Sun tubes is one of the early things that we brought on, like bringing in natural daylight throughout the building wherever you can so you don't have to light things. Looking at your office, because beyond the brewery, looking at what your office furniture is, your office carpeting, your office lighting, that can over time use up a lot of energy, and it also speaks to what's happening in your supply chain. Who are you buying things from? Are you supporting businesses that are trying to be as sustainable as you hope to be? I think that's an important place where we want our customers to spend their money according to their values, so we should be doing the same thing.
Well, one of the things that I know you guys have each talked about too is building like this culture internally of being more sustainable and having that translate not just in the way that you guys buy things or use things, but also in the values that your staff has. How do you get how do you get your goals as a brewery to come across through your staff? Jen?
Sorry, that's...
For our coworkers, they know it's an expectation when they're hired. They know what they're getting into, right? So I think a lot of the reasons that people are attracted to work here is because we are values-driven and because sustainability is important. And then because since 1995, our coworkers know how we make a profit. They know what our expenses are. We've opened the books to them. And they have budget accountability. So there are people who budget that natural gas number, that electricity number, the waste hauling service number. Like, people have responsibility for that throughout the brewery. And they want to hit a target. And they, there's positive peer pressure around doing that. And thinking of those new projects that will help us not necessarily the capital projects, but the way that we operate. It's people who are in operations who have that visibility, and surfacing that knowledge and, bringing it up to the decision makers, I think, is important.
For sure. Dany, kind of what you had mentioned before with New Belgium having not one but two directors of sustainability versus the zero that you guys have. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have some level of credibility with sustainability. It's something that you guys have chosen to take on and you guys care about at your breweries. I think there are a lot of breweries out there that can identify with that aren't necessarily at the same level as New Belgium. Most craft breweries, in fact, are not at the same level of New Belgium. But I mean, one of the things that I think is important to kind of touch on or to consider is, ways that you can improve. You might not be able to buy expensive CO2, recapturing equipment. You might not be able to do a lot of the same larger scale things that a brewery that's been around for, 20 plus years can do, but you do have goals that you can set. And you have reasoning behind those goals. And I'm curious about what your areas are that you think you guys could improve on.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go ahead. So speaking to that, I'd say one goal that we kind of had was very similar to what Dany was talking about is, with part of our rebrand, we decided to take our main line into cans. That's one of the decisions we tried to make. After that, though, I would have to say we kind of have to go back to the board now. We hit that project. We kind of want to settle in a little bit. But after that, it's kind of time to go back and see what's next.
Sure. Dany?
Yeah, we have been approached for a group of CU, University of Colorado, about they have this idea to create this algae that to produce omega-3, and they thought they can use our CO2 in order to grow the algae, and we were like, oh, sure, you can take a part of our CO2. Let's sit down, talk about, and see if we can give you a space here in the brewery. And we are working with them right now. First, we have this idea that we can put a greenhouse all on the top of the brewery. Didn't work because the engineer and the structural engineers say, no, the snow can handle that load, blah, blah, blah. And then now we are looking at another building next to the brewery that can put them in that place, and just again, it's being aware. Don't shut the door to someone to come with a crazy idea. Just go and try to work with them, and it could be a good thing, even if it's kind of crazy, because they will not be able to use all the CO2 that we put in the atmosphere. Still, they're gonna use 1% of that. So let's be open to that and help with. In those areas when someone comes with crazy ideas, maybe something, some innovation for the future.
Sure. Jen, what about you guys?
Well, we're looking forward to, after getting Asheville online, coming back to Fort Collins with our engineering talent and making some great improvements here. And part of that is going to be setting more aggressive energy efficiency goals. And how we achieve them will undoubtedly be in the process. And like we were talking about beer losses and extract efficiency, it could look like more renewable energy on site. We've had our fair share of looking at crazy ideas over the years, like CO2 to algae or spent grain to energy. And I think that's really right to keep your mind open to what's available, but getting back on it to the nuts and bolts as well.
Are there alternative lines of revenue for that, though? I mean, are there alternative ways that you can make money? You're generating all this CO2, and I know kind of what they're touching on is there's this algae company that or this organization that wants to capture omega-3 oils to use for medicine that is reduced or it comes out of algae, and they're basically feeding algae for free with their CO2 that they're generating anyway. And the motivation behind that is that at least it's going to use somewhere. We're generating it anyway. Now it's getting used for something helpful. But I mean, are there alternative lines of revenue for that? I mean, can you make money off of your spent grain? Can you have proprietary spent grain? Can you make money off of the CO2 that you produce and have repurposed somewhere else?
I feel when you keep growing, it's easier to be more sustainable. When bigger you are, it's much easier to be sustainable. It's harder when you are in a small brewery. But again, there are a lot of things that a small brewery can't do, and a lot of people maybe don't look at that because they are so busy and try to make the beer and to be profitable, and they don't realize that if they do small stuff, they can definitely save more energy and money as well for the company. It's just a matter of be aware, have this awareness about the environment and going to help the business.
Well, I mean, so, kind of like what you're saying, besides the fact that, we all want to be more environmentally sustainable, as altruistic and genuine as our motivations are with this, there are some other benefits to becoming more sustainable, like you're, cutting back on waste, but it's something that consumers care a lot about. It's something that, individuals who are going to be going out and buying the products that we're making are going to care a lot about. Have you guys noticed any kind of positive response from consumers? Are they more likely to reach for a product that they know is going to be more sustainably minded or a greener beer?
Yeah, I wanted to note about that. I'm not sure if everyone want to be sustainable or even are thinking about that. There are some people I guess we are doing in our case what we could. New Belgium is doing great things, but there are people who don't even think about that. I feel not everyone wants to be sustainable. They don't even thinking about that, and that's what makes the difference. When you start thinking that you want to be sustainable, you can start looking at all this waste and all this usage that you have, and that's when you can make the difference.
Well, does that make it harder for you guys to
for sure
do what you're trying to do?
Yeah, for sure. You need to put some energy on that, and there are brewers out there or some people that don't even think about this, and I think that's where first you need to be the change. You have to have the intention to be sustainable. If you don't have at least that, you're not gonna do any difference. So anyone want to be sustainable.
How has a lack of interest in becoming sustainable, not just for breweries, but for businesses or people in general, how has that impacted your ability as brewers to accomplish your goals?
Sorry, you said a lack
Yeah,
of...
I mean, if there are people out there who aren't interested, if there are people out there who don't really care about this issue and who are not interested in this, how has that impacted your ability? I mean, have you had a harder time getting access to materials or getting access to technology or?
It's not because there are bad people out there then don't care about the environment. They are not even thinking that they could be sustainable in certain level or certain degree. Because if you think, if we are not the size of a New Belgium, I cannot be sustainable, it's a bad start point. You can be a certain degree sustainable being in a small brewery. Just you need to be, you need to have that intention, and you're gonna start finding a lot of places on your small brewery with not much invest of money to be sustainable. So.
Well, I have time for. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on to that. I mean, the other thing that when it comes to the consumer, it might be hard to judge. There are other studies that say, millennials, the upcoming generation, younger generation are more conscious of it. I mean, the other thing you have to factor into is what community are you living into? I mean, you look at Fort Collins, and it's very conscious of what's going on, and it pushes for it. It puts it into policy, and so it's something that everybody has to deal with, whether it's consumer input or not.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess to that matter, then I'm curious what you guys think about the future. What does the future hold for this kind of initiative? I mean, what kinds of technology are you seeing develop right now that could make things more easy for brewers who are trying to become more sustainable? Or what do you think is yet to be done to make this a bigger priority in the industry? Jen?
Well, my personal view is that we hope it becomes table stakes, and we hope that everyone is as passionate about resource efficiency as everyone on this panel. But I don't think it's going to happen until unless there's regulation. And I think that regulation will drive technology development, not the other way around. So until it becomes the cost of water and the cost of energy becomes such that the ROI tilts on those technologies, people aren't going to be able to. I mean, good business people who don't have a heart for it won't implement them. So that's why we're pretty passionate to raise the bar on having water and energy costs what they're really worth.
So what else needs to be done then to change the conversation about this? What needs to be done to make more people talk about this and make more people care besides, pushing for new regulation? I mean, how do you accomplish something like that? How do you get more people to talk about this and become more open about it?
Education, culture about, spread the word about the why it's good for you, be sustainable, and education basically, I think. I wonder how many people buy our product because we are forestry sustainable resource. I don't know out there how many people look at the cardboard in our packaging and say, I'm buying Upslope because they are that way. And some people buy your beer because it's a good beer, not because you are trying to be sustainable. And that, if you are a beer drinking, I think that could be the first priority. Your beer should be good. But if you, if you are an educated people about, hey, I'm care where the cardboard, what tree was being cut to make this cardboard box, and this beer are as good like this one, that could make a difference. So education, I feel is
Marketing.
Huge. Yeah.
Marketing a little bit too.
I do agree to an extent. Marketing, education, but I also feel like, to an extent, I've always been a big believer of leading by example, and so it can be easier and harder than others. But like New Belgium, they do a great job doing it. They truly live it day in and day out. And so I think when you take a company like that, it really shows, and I feel like you can easily get people behind it. And so I think it's something to strive for. I mean, it's something that we can continue to strive for at FCB, to continue to improve. But for me personally, I've always been a big proponent of that.
For sure. And also using the BA's benchmarking program.
That would help too.
Don't forget. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much for coming out. I really appreciate you guys take the time to talk about this.
I'm just going to steal a mic and say thank you to everyone for coming out, and thank you to Jane for hosting the last panel. Big round of applause for Jane and all our panelists in New Belgium, and Brian Simpson over there who helped put this together with me, and the entire Brewbound team, Josh and Corey back there, the sound guys, our sponsors. Let's go get a beer at the bar. Cheers.